The shrill ring of my office phone broke the midnight stillness, its urgency slicing through the fog of my exhaustion. I answered it reluctantly, expecting another mundane consultation about missing pets or creaking floorboards mistaken for ghosts. Instead, the voice on the other end sent a chill down my spine. "Elric Graves," the man said, his Japanese accent pronounced but his tone steady. "We need your expertise. There has been an incident on Shikoku Island. 10 dead, no suspects. Shikoku, an island steeped in myth and shadow." My heart sank as he continued. "There are rumors," he hesitated. "Whispers of Jorōgumo." I didn't need the translation. Jorōgumo, the Spider Woman, was a name I had encountered before, lurking in the recesses of Japanese folklore. A seductive yokai capable of weaving webs not only of silk but of deceit, she lured her prey with beauty and charm, before revealing her true, monstrous form. "You're certain it's her?" I asked. "No," he admitted. "But the bodies, torn apart, drained. We have no other explanation." It wasn't the first time my reputation as an investigator of the unnatural had reached across oceans. Curiosity mingled with dread. "I'll be on the next flight." As I packed my bag, I couldn't help but wonder, why now? Jorōgumo was a legend, a cautionary tale. What could have awakened her, and was she truly hunting again? The sun was just beginning to set when my plane landed on Shikoku, casting long shadows across the tarmac. My contact, a police inspector named Nakamura, greeted me with a curt bow. He was younger than I expected, his face lined more from stress than age. "We've arranged for you to stay at a ryokan near the village," he said as we drove through winding roads bordered by dense forests. "It's close to the scene of the first murders." "Convenient," I murmured. As we approached the village, the air grew heavy with an unnatural stillness. Even the wind seemed reluctant to disturb the oppressive quiet. Nakamura explained the details of the case: 10 bodies found over the span of 2 weeks, all in varying states of mutilation. The victims ranged from a local fisherman to an elderly woman, their deaths united by one grotesque detail: every drop of blood drained from their bodies. We stopped at a modest police station, its stark fluorescent lights a jarring contrast to the encroaching night. Nakamura handed me a file containing photographs of the victims. I had seen death before, but this was wrong. The wounds were too clean, too deliberate. "They say she appears as a beautiful woman in a silk kimono," Nakamura said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She entices men, and when they are close enough, she reveals her true form, a monstrous spider." "And these stories?" I asked. "Are they recent?" He hesitated. "Yes. Several villagers claim to have seen her near the river. A woman with a haunting smile." I stared at the photographs again, feeling the weight of the case settling on my shoulders. This wasn't just a hunt. It was a dance with death, and Jorōgumo held the strings. The ryokan where I was to stay was a traditional inn perched on the edge of the village, its paper walls and tatami mats offering little comfort against the encroaching darkness. The innkeeper, an elderly woman named Yuki, greeted me with a bow and an unsettling smile. "You've come for the spider," she said bluntly as she handed me the room key. I paused. "What do you know about it?" "Enough to stay away," she replied, her tone cryptic. "But the young ones, they never listen. They follow the laughter into the woods, and they don't return." Later that night, I wandered through the village, my senses attuned to every flicker of movement, every whisper of the wind. The locals avoided my gaze, their faces etched with fear. At the edge of the river, I found an offering, a small plate of rice and sake, placed beneath a gnarled tree. "She's not just a story here," Nakamura said, appearing behind me. His voice carried the weight of someone who had seen too much. "To them, she's real. And she's hungry." The air grew colder as the river lapped softly against the shore. Somewhere in the distance, a woman's laughter echoed, a sound too sweet, too perfect to be anything but a lie. "Tell me, Inspector," I said, gripping my silver dagger beneath my coat. "Do you believe in ghosts?" "No," he said, though his eyes betrayed him. "But I believe in fear." At dawn, Nakamura and I retraced the path of one of the victims, a young farmer named Hiro. His body had been discovered near a forested path leading to the river. The air was damp, and the underbrush glistened with dew as we pushed deeper into the woods. The crime scene was marked by yellow tape, but nature was already reclaiming it. Bloodstains had darkened the soil, and claw marks gouged deep into the trees suggested something far larger than any predator native to Japan. "There," Nakamura said, pointing to a low-hanging branch. Strands of silk shimmered in the morning light, impossibly fine yet unnervingly strong. I pulled on a glove and plucked a strand. "Not from any ordinary spider," I muttered. The silk was almost alive, its surface writhing under my touch. Nakamura watched uneasily as I pocketed the sample. "Do you think she's real, Jorōgumo?" "I've seen stranger things," I replied. "But legends often hide something worse, a truth twisted by time." As we searched the area, I noticed patterns in the claw marks. They weren't random, they formed spirals and glyphs I'd encountered in ancient texts. Protective wards, perhaps, or a summoning sigil. Whatever their purpose, they hadn't worked. The laughter from the previous night echoed faintly in my memory. "She's not just feeding," I said aloud. "She's marking territory." By midday, we reached the village shrine. Nakamura had mentioned it as a place where some villagers claimed to have seen Jorōgumo lurking. The shrine was old, its wood weathered and moss-covered, but its aura was palpable, a lingering energy that set my teeth on edge. Offerings of sake and flowers lined the steps, and strange carvings adorned the torii gate. The air grew colder as I ascended, and the faint smell of decay curled into my nostrils. Inside the shrine, a small statue depicted a woman with spider legs protruding from her back. Her face was serene, almost divine, but the sight was enough to chill my blood. Nakamura flinched. "I've been here dozens of times. That wasn't here before." I knelt to examine the base of the statue. More silk trailed around it, forming an intricate web. Buried beneath the strands, I uncovered a tooth, a human molar. "She's nesting," I said grimly, my voice tight with revulsion. "This isn't just about killing. She's preparing for something." Before I could say more, a sharp crack echoed through the forest. Nakamura drew his firearm, scanning the trees. "We're not alone," he whispered. The shadows around us seemed to ripple, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw movement, a lithe figure weaving through the trees. The laughter returned, closer this time, wrapping around us like silk. "Stay close," I warned, drawing my revolver. The silver bullets glinted in the fading sunlight, a fragile shield against the unknown. That evening, we returned to the village. Word of our encounter at the shrine had spread, and the villagers were even more reluctant to speak. Only one woman, a widow named Kiyomi, agreed to talk. "They say she preys on men," Kiyomi said, her voice trembling. "But that's not true. She takes women too, if they get too close." Her hands shook as she passed me a faded photograph of a young woman. "My daughter, Akiko, disappeared 2 months ago. The police said it was an accident, that she fell into the river, but I know better. I saw her, at night, standing by the water. She looked at me, her eyes hollow. It wasn't her. Not anymore." The room grew still as Kiyomi recounted her tale. She had seen Akiko again, days after her disappearance. The girl had smiled, beckoning her closer. But when Kiyomi stepped toward her, she saw the truth. Akiko's eyes were lifeless, her body wrapped in a shroud of silk. "She whispered something," Kiyomi said, clutching a string of prayer beads. "Mother, come with me." But I ran. I ran, and I never looked back. "Did anyone else see her?" I asked. Kiyomi shook her head. They won't admit it. But others have vanished since. And now she waits. As I left, I couldn't shake the image of Kiyomi's daughter. If the spider woman could mimic her prey, how many of the villagers had already fallen into her web? That night, I stayed awake in my room at the ryokan, the dim glow of a lantern casting flickering shadows across the walls. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional creak of the floorboards. Around midnight, the laughter returned. It was faint at first, a melodic trill carried on the wind. Then it grew louder, closer. I stood, my hand instinctively reaching for the silver dagger on my bedside table. Elric, a voice called, sweet and familiar. It came from the window. I turned slowly, the lantern light casting my shadow long and thin. Outside, the village lay silent under the moonlight. But there, just beyond the window, stood a woman in a silk kimono. Her face was pale, her lips curved into a gentle smile. Elric, she repeated, her voice lilting like a song. Won't you come outside? I stepped closer, my grip on the dagger tightening. The woman's eyes were dark, bottomless pits that seemed to swallow the light. No, I said, my voice firm. You come to me. Her smile widened, revealing teeth too sharp, too numerous. In an instant, the illusion shattered. Her body contorted, spider legs unfurling from her back as her true form emerged, a monstrous hybrid of woman and arachnid, her limbs bristling with fine hairs. Before I could react, she vanished into the shadows, leaving only a trail of silk in her wake. I exhaled, my heart pounding. The hunt had begun in earnest, and Jorōgumo had made her first move. The morning after my encounter, I gathered the villagers in the center of the hamlet. Their fear was palpable, their eyes darting nervously toward the forest's edge. Even the children, usually oblivious to danger, clung silently to their parents. Nakamura stood beside me, his hand resting on the grip of his firearm. They won't listen, he muttered under his breath. They'll stay afraid. They have every reason to be, I replied. But fear won't save them. I stepped forward, my voice steady. Listen to me, I began, my gaze sweeping across the gathered faces. What's hunting you isn't just a legend. Jorōgumo is real, and she will not stop until every one of you is trapped in her web. A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd, but I raised a hand to silence them. She preys on fear and isolation. If you stay divided, if you hide behind your walls, you'll fall. Together, we stand a chance. An older man, weathered and stooped, stepped forward. And what chance do we have against a monster? He demanded. What can we do that she can't undo? I held up the strands of silk I had taken from the shrine. This isn't just her weapon, it's her weakness. Fire, salt, and steel can break it. We need to arm ourselves, fortify this village, and set traps. If we lure her out, we can end this. The villagers exchanged uneasy glances, their resolve uncertain. But then Kiyomi stepped forward, her voice quaking but resolute. We've lived in fear too long. I'll fight. One by one, others joined her. The momentum was fragile, but it was enough. We began preparing the village for a battle that no one truly believed we could win. As the villagers gathered supplies, oil for lanterns, iron tools, and handfuls of salt, I focused on mapping the forest. Nakamura and I retraced the paths surrounding the murders, piecing together a grim pattern. The attacks radiated outward from a central point, converging near the old shrine. It wasn't a coincidence, this was her lair. We'll draw her out, I said, marking the shrine's location on a map. But we need bait. Nakamura's jaw tightened. You mean a person? I mean me, I said, tucking the map into my coat. I'll lead her to the traps. You're insane, he snapped. You don't even know if she'll take the bait. She will, I replied grimly. She's already noticed me. That night, as the villagers prepared their defenses, I scoured my journals for rituals and wards. Jorōgumo wasn't just a predator, she was a yokai, bound by rules and ancient magic. If I could exploit that, we might survive. But as I worked, a strange sensation crept over me, a faint prickling at the back of my neck, as though unseen eyes were watching. When I turned, the room was empty, but the shadows felt too deep, too alive. "She's close," I murmured. "Too close." The attack came at midnight. The village, fortified and tense, erupted into chaos as a chilling scream tore through the silence. Nakamura and I burst from the ryokan, our weapons drawn. Near the edge of the village, flames licked at the night sky, a barn, set ablaze. The air was thick with the acrid stench of burning wood and the faint, sickly sweetness of silk. "She's here!" Nakamura shouted, pointing toward a dark figure darting between the buildings. I sprinted after her, my silver dagger glinting in the firelight. She moved with an unnatural grace, her laughter ringing through the village like a siren's call. But when I cornered her near the well, she stopped, her form shifting. It was Kiyomi's daughter, Akiko. "Elric," she said, her voice trembling. "Help me." I hesitated. Her eyes were wide with fear, her hands trembling. But something was wrong, her movements were too smooth, her voice too perfect. I stepped closer, and her lips curled into a sly smile. The illusion shattered. Jorōgumo lunged, her monstrous limbs slashing through the air. I barely dodged in time, my dagger grazing her carapace. She hissed, her voice a blend of human and spider, before vanishing into the shadows. Nakamura arrived moments later, panting and wild-eyed. "Did you see her?" "More than that," I said, gripping my weapon. "She's testing us." The villagers huddled together in the church, their fear thick enough to taste. I stood before them, trying to piece together a plan. My encounter had confirmed one thing: Jorōgumo wasn't just hunting, she was playing with us. Yuki, the innkeeper, approached me cautiously. "There is something you should see," she said, her voice trembling. She led me to a small storeroom behind the ryokan. Inside, buried beneath layers of dust, was an ancient scroll. The paper was brittle, the ink faded, but the drawings were unmistakable: Jorōgumo, weaving her web around a village. "This was left by my great-grandmother," Yuki explained. "She claimed the spider woman came here once before. They stopped her, but it required sacrifice." I unrolled the scroll carefully, my eyes scanning the text. It described a ritual to banish Jorōgumo, one that required binding her to her lair and burning it to the ground. But the price was steep, the life of the one performing the ritual. "Convenient that they left that part out," Nakamura said, leaning over my shoulder. "She's anchored here," I said, ignoring his sarcasm. "If we destroy the lair, we destroy her. But the ritual has to be perfect." The villagers stared at me, their fear mingled with hope. They didn't yet know the full cost of what I was planning. "Get some rest," I told them. "Tomorrow, we finish this." The sun rose reluctantly over Shikoku, casting pale light over a village teetering on the edge of despair. Every face I passed bore the weight of sleepless nights and dread-filled whispers. But there was no turning back now. The scroll Yuki had revealed was the key, both to Jorōgumo's power and her destruction. Nakamura and I pored over its instructions, deciphering the archaic Japanese script. The ritual required 3 elements: a personal token from Jorōgumo's lair, a ward etched in human blood, and fire imbued with sacred oils. As we prepared to enter the forest, the villagers gathered, their silent gazes heavy with expectation. Some offered prayers, others small talismans of protection. Kiyomi pressed a charm into my hand. "For strength," she whispered. The forest swallowed us whole as Nakamura and I moved deeper into its shadowy heart. The trees grew gnarled and ancient, their twisted limbs forming a canopy that choked out the daylight. Every step felt like a violation, the air thick with tension and the faint, cloying scent of silk. "We're close," Nakamura said, his voice barely above a whisper. He gestured to the ground, where faint traces of the elongated tracks appeared again, leading us toward the shrine. Ahead, the clearing opened like a wound, revealing Jorōgumo's lair. The shrine had transformed, its walls veined with thick strands of webbing that glistened in the dim light. The statue inside had grown grotesque, its once serene face now twisted into a visage of hunger and malice. The lair pulsed with an unnatural rhythm, as if alive. "Stay sharp," I murmured, stepping into the clearing. We approached cautiously, every movement measured. The scroll had instructed us to retrieve an object tied to Jorōgumo's power. My instincts told me it would be near the statue. The webs clung to us as we moved, their sticky threads catching on our clothes and hair. Nakamura grimaced as he cut through them with his blade. "She knows we're here." "Good," I said, reaching the base of the shrine. I examined the statue carefully, my eyes searching for anything out of place. There, nestled in the folds of its silk-draped base, was a small lacquered box. I reached for it, my fingers brushing the smooth surface, when the air shifted. The oppressive silence broke with a hiss that sent shivers down my spine. "Elric," Nakamura warned, his weapon raised. I turned, and there she was. Jorōgumo emerged from the shadows, her true form grotesque and horrifying. Her humanoid torso was draped in flowing silk, her face unnervingly beautiful despite the glint of fangs beneath her lips. Her lower body, however, was monstrous, a massive spider's abdomen supported by 8 chitinous legs that clicked menacingly against the ground. "You've come so far," she said, her voice a sickly melody. "But you will not leave." Jorōgumo moved with terrifying speed, her limbs a blur as she lunged toward us. I dove to the side, the lacquered box clutched in my hand. Nakamura fired, the silver-tipped bullets finding their mark in her abdomen. She screeched, the sound piercing enough to rattle my teeth, but the wounds only seemed to enrage her. "Keep her busy," I shouted, scrambling toward the edge of the clearing. Nakamura didn't answer, but his steady gunfire echoed through the forest. Jorōgumo's laughter mingled with the chaos, her voice mocking. "You think your little tricks can harm me?" I reached a safe distance and opened the box. Inside was a single strand of hair, long and gleaming with an unnatural light. It pulsed in time with the lair, confirming my suspicions. It was her anchor, the source of her connection to this place. "Elric, move!" Nakamura's shout snapped me back to the moment. Jorōgumo bore down on me, her fangs dripping venom. I rolled away, narrowly avoiding her strike, and brandished my dagger. "This ends now," I said through gritted teeth. She hissed, her laughter turning to rage. "Fool! You cannot cut the threads of fate." With the hair secured, I pulled a small flask of sacred oil from my coat and doused the strand. Nakamura covered me as I lit the flame, the fire springing to life with a brilliant, golden glow. The lair reacted violently. The webs trembled, and the air filled with an unearthly wail. Jorōgumo recoiled, her form flickering as if caught between worlds. "No!" she shrieked, lunging toward me. Nakamura intercepted her, his blade catching one of her legs and severing it. She screamed, but the injury didn't slow her for long. I worked quickly, using the blood from a shallow cut on my palm to etch the ward into the ground around the shrine. The words from the scroll tumbled from my lips, the ancient chant filling the clearing with a resonant hum. Jorōgumo thrashed, her monstrous body writhing as the flames consumed the hair. "Finish it!" Nakamura yelled, struggling to hold her back. I completed the ward, slamming my bloodied hand against the final sigil. The ground trembled, and a surge of energy exploded outward, engulfing Jorōgumo in light. She screamed, her voice a blend of rage and anguish, before her form collapsed into ash. The lair disintegrated around us, the webs burning away until nothing remained but scorched earth and silence. The forest was still as we emerged, our bodies bruised and battered but alive. The villagers greeted us with cautious hope, their fear giving way to tentative relief as we recounted what had transpired. Yuki's face was grave as she examined the ashes I had brought back. "She is gone," she said softly. "But her kind always finds a way to return." The village held a quiet vigil that night, their prayers a fragile shield against the lingering shadows. As I prepared to leave Shikoku, Nakamura approached me, his expression conflicted. "You saved them," he said. "But for how long?" "Long enough," I replied. "And that's all we can do." As the ferry carried me away from the haunted island, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jorōgumo's story wasn't finished. The threads of her web stretched far beyond Shikoku, and somewhere, in the dark corners of the world, another spider woman might already be spinning.